I don't think I broke 100. Like 4 days, I had balls that I thought were physically impossible. I had one drive.
We are live for today.
What?
Am I on? No, I don't think so.
I feel relatively okay myself. You're not on, are you?
Trying to get more people for my meetings than you get for this.
Yeah, but John got through his
Not
quicker.
necessarily
for good reason.
Not on.
But John got through his quicker.
That is true. That is true.
That we might even say something.
I'm thinking we will.
Wait,
We're on here, and
nobody knows. He's not on.
Hold on just a second.
What do you feel for what? Because you like don't you? This could be part of your permanent record.
you know, Rusty, that clock is 3 minutes fast. So I have everybody thinking, why am I waiting here, right? That's what I said. I don't want everybody staring at that clock and thinking I'm asleep
But
on the
then
job.
again,
So
you know, one starting early is not a bad thing to do.
what? Another million we could have gotten in the works. Sorry, Charlie. At the risk of being a rebel and starting early, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Would everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First item of business is the approval of the minutes for the Town Council meeting on September 4th. Do I have a motion to approve?
Approved?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, changes?
I had
editing?
just a few changes and I've already given them to Petra. Just some kind of wordsmithing.
Okay. Any other changes? No. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Mayor's update. I've just got just a couple things. One, just a reminder, I think we've communicated several times and also in the local press that following Hurricane Florence, Charleston Mayor John Tecklenburg and North Charleston Mayor Keith Sumney, in conjunction with a number of other mayors from area communities, including myself from Kiowa, created the Low Country Mayor's Disaster Relief Fund. And we want to make sure that our citizens are aware of that. This fund obviously is there to accept donations and help those people of the counties and towns in South Carolina and North Carolina that were impacted by the storm. This fund has been established through the Coastal Community Foundation of South Carolina, and any residents who would like to contribute, we actually have a donation link on our website where you can find the link. So that I want to put a reminder out on that. The second thing is this Thursday, we are having an event called Fall Back to Kiowa. It's on Thursday from 4 to 7. It's on the Municipal Center back lawn. And we are going to have a band, Robbie Madison Band. We're going to have one food truck? Two food trucks, plus Ben and Jerry's cart with ice cream, and we'll have a food and beverage for sale. And so this is, we built this beautiful town hall, opened it now a year and a month ago. So many of our residents have not yet had a chance to come and see what we have here. We've got a beautiful back lawn, and so this is an opportunity for people to come and I think enjoy what I think is going to be good weather. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And that's all I've got. So I will open up to citizens' comments. Anyone have comments related to items that are on today's agenda?
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. I actually wasn't going to say anything, but based on your comments, your opening comments, I just wanted to say if anybody has an opportunity to visit the city of Atlanta, I heartily encourage it. We had our hurricane there, and aside from the fact that our hotel waived the pet fee, so that having our 4 cats with us didn't cost us anything, the aquarium and the botanical gardens both significantly reduced their admission for refugees from North and South Carolina, significantly below the old people rate we normally pay. People could not have been more wonderful. And I understand that the Atlanta Braves let anyone from North or South Carolina in to watch their games free of charge. So I think that was just, the way you're talking about neighborliness, I just think that was a fabulous thing for them to do.
Which is better hospitality than some hotels in South Carolina who during that storm raised their prices hugely. Yeah.
Dave DiStefano, 31 Burroughs Hall. As I'm sure you're all aware, I am the chairman of the Public Works Committee, and I want to discuss the process of how we got to what's on the agenda today. I originally got an email that there was going to be a meeting either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of that week. I sent an email back I was only available on Friday. I never heard back. 8:30 on Friday morning, an email went out, we're having a meeting at 10 o'clock. I saw that email at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I responded, I think under those conditions, I think all of the committee members should have received a phone call that there's a meeting in an hour and a half. I know they had a telephone conversation with Kimberly Horn. I don't believe there was any telephone conversation with either of the other 2 bidders. And I think the representation of what the bids are in the agenda is a little off, because I analyzed it, and I think for the design services, which is being granted to Kimberly Horn, they were all 3 pretty much competitive. I think, I don't know what the urgency was to call a meeting at 8:30 for 10 o'clock. There was 2 committee members there, Steve Sager and Will Connor. One committee member has since resigned, and another committee member was not happy of that process. I think if a meeting's going to be called an hour and a half before, phone calls should be made to make sure people could get there. And why it had to be at 10 o'clock, maybe later on in the afternoon, more people would have been there. So as the chairman of the committee, I have no idea whether this is the proper recommendation to this council. I'm not objecting to it. I know it's an extremely tight time frame to get this work done. I just think the process could have been a little better. We're actually at the point that the committee agreed in January of this year that the only resolution to this was going to be a left-hand, an expansion to the south, as Kimberly Horn has said, with the turn lane, the existing right-hand turn lane being the right turn lane in there. That was what the committee unanimously thought was going to be the process. We're 10 months later. That's exactly where we are. And I just think the whole process got a little out of control.
Thanks. All right, any other comments?
And my comments are about Carolina Waste, so do you want to hear them now, or do you want to hear them at the end? Trash. Not about the compactor, but it is Carolina Waste.
Let's do it at the second.
Okay.
The second citizens' comments. You'll still be here, right? Okay, yeah, but, yeah, I'd like to stay with the approach, so thanks, thank you. All right, any other citizens' comments? All right, with that, we will go to presentations. We have a presentation for council today on our annual audit. Emily Sobczak from Green Finney LLP, and we have everything on the screen behind us. So Emily, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, I am Emily Sobczak. I'm with Green Finney. We are the town's financial auditors, and I'm here to present the results of the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018. Because we do only typically see you as council once a year, we do like to remind you that while we are here, I am here presenting the financial statements, the town's responsibility in regards to those statements is ongoing. Throughout the year, Dorota and her department, along with Stephanie and the rest of the town, are responsible for ensuring that the financial information that's provided not only to us at year end, but to you throughout the year, that information is complete, accurate, and reliable. And in order to ensure that, it's important that the town has good internal controls in place. And so over the past few years, Dorota and Stephanie have implemented a lot of changes and improvements to make sure that the internal controls are sound and that they are operating effectively. And so that is part of what we look at during our audit is obtaining an understanding of those controls, and we offer, when we feel like it's warranted, we offer recommendations regarding those controls, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So our responsibility as your auditor is to audit the financial information provided by the town and issue an opinion on that financial information. We did issue an unmodified opinion this year, and as you'll recall, that is the best opinion you can receive. That's a clean opinion, and that opinion provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So it is important to keep in mind that while we are looking at a lot of transactions and a lot of different things during the audit process, we're not looking at every single transaction that occurred during the year. So looking at your financial information at year end, your general fund had a total fund balance of $8 million at June 30th. That was an increase of $1.1 million from prior year. Included in that $8 million is a small portion that's classified as non-spendable. This amount, the $115,000, relates to premiums that were paid prior to June 30th for services to be rendered in fiscal 19. So funds that are not in spendable form for fiscal 19. They've already been spent. That leaves you with unassigned fund balance or funds available for future operations of $7.9 million. We do like to compare that to your operating expenditures to give you an idea of where your equity stands to your operations, and you're looking at about 160% of your 2019 budgeted expenditures included in your unassigned fund balance. So very good financial condition as of June 30. And you'll see here we do, as we've mentioned in the past, really the only guideline that's provided by any of the national associations regarding your fund balance is provided by the Government Finance Officers Association, and that's a generic recommendation that local governments should have no less than 2 months of operating expenditures in their unassigned fund balance. But we think it's important that that you maintain a level much higher than that, and so we think it's appropriate that your fund balance is quite a bit higher than that, because you have a number of unique requirements as a coastal community, a number of unique risks. And so some of those we've outlined here. Of course, you know, if you have one of the purposes of your fund balance is to prepare for unanticipated expenditures, expenditures related to natural disasters, which we are continually reminded of each year over the past few years, that you know, we are constantly at risk for hurricanes and other you know, flooding and other similar natural disasters that could result in significant losses to the town or a significant demand on your cash flows. Having a healthy fund balance also allows you, when you do choose to issue debt for financing purposes, it gets you much better interest rates and allows you to perform more strategic planning for the town, having those funds available. So looking at your activity for the year, your general fund had revenues of $5.9 million. As you can see, that was about 11% higher than budget, and you're primarily better than budget in the areas of business licenses and building permits. And those areas were also higher than the prior year. So as you can see, your business licenses increased by over 200,000, and a large part of that was really related to changes that the town made to better monitor the licenses that were coming in, to make sure that any vendors that were operating on the island, or individuals that were, you know, individuals and companies offering short-term rentals, that all of those business licenses that should have been received, that they are being received and collected. And so that's really great work by management, that their hard work was really truly paying off there. You also had an increase in building permits, an increase in court fines. You saw a decrease compared to the prior year when it came to federal revenues. Remember, in the prior years when you received some federal reimbursements related to Hurricane Matthew. And then you also saw significant increases in your investment returns. You began participating in the South Carolina Local Government Investment Pool, and that was really a great move. The pool had a very successful year as far as investment returns, and that was shared by the town. On the expenditure side, you had expenditures of $5.1 million. Those were $120,000 greater than budget, primarily as a result of Hurricane Irma cleanup expenses. Other departments were largely consistent with budget, but in the storm cleanup area, unfortunately, we did have some additional costs there. And you had, while your expenditures were greater than budget, they were less than the prior year by about 3%. And a big part of that is that in the prior year, Hurricane Matthew cleanup expenses were much higher than the expenditures related to Hurricane Irma. And so I wish those expenditures had been zero, but at least they were better than the year before. So here we look at all of your funds combined. So adding to your general fund the capital projects, the special revenue funds, you're looking at revenues of $9.6 million for the year and expenditures of $7.8 million. So in total, you had an increase in fund balance of about $1.8 million compared to fiscal 17. As you may recall, on your government-wide level statement, so those first two statements included in your report, where you add on your long-term assets and obligations, beginning a few years ago, we began reporting a net pension liability related to your participation in the state retirement system. And the important thing to remember as it relates to the pension accounting is that while you are reporting that large liability on your statement of net position, that really isn't a liability that you have any control over. You don't have control over the size of the liability or the rate at which you pay it back. What you're responsible for is to continue making your required employer and employee contributions to the retirement plan as mandated by the state. And so the key there is that the state has approved rate increases to continue for the next several years. And so as you're working through your budget process each year, it's important to remember that the retirement expenditures, those fringe benefits, will be increasing even if staff levels stay the same. Your personnel costs are going up.
Emily, isn't it true, though, the one very important thing we do have control over is the number of people that the town employs full-time? Is that?
Yes, sir.
This is a direct tie into that, is that correct?
Sure,
Yeah.
yep. Yes, and so certainly, you know, as the staffing level changes, the liability changes as well. But like I said, what the main concern for the town is the actual cash outflows, those retirement contributions that you're having to pay, which will, over the next few years, which will climb to the employer required rate will be close to 19% for all employees. So they are getting quite significant. Another area that you have control over is in your other post-employment benefit plan. So this is your retiree health care plan that you just recently approved. And in fiscal 18, we implemented a new GASB standard, GASB 75. As the standard is very similar to the standard related to pensions. So the reporting for this plan is very similar to the reporting for the pension plan. The biggest difference is that this is the town's plan. And so you determine the benefits, the eligibility requirements, and how contributions will be made. And so we did report a net OPEB liability, so related to the unfunded actuarial liability for the plan, of $281,000. Again, that's just on your statement of net position. It does not affect your governmental funds, does not affect your general fund statements. And the town is operating this plan as a pay as you go. So, you know, if and when you have retirees that are eligible for benefits of the plan, the town will be paying a portion of their premiums in accordance with the town's, with the plan requirements, the plan benefit requirements.
So if we, at some point, if we have an employee who actually uses this benefit, what we'll see is, we'll see an actual cash expenditure starting
Correct.
to apply. But as a result, there'll be some offsetting reduction in the liability, right? Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And because this is an actuarial liability, it will change slightly year to year, but
Right.
the significant changes, yes, would come as you have employees that actually use the plan. So then looking at your long-term assets and obligations, capital assets were $14.4 million as of year end. That was an increase of about $80,000 from prior year, resulting from close to $700,000 in additions, offset by depreciation expense of a little over $600,000. Your biggest addition was the completion of the municipal center. That did occur in early fiscal 18. And then you also had some other infrastructure improvements and some other equipment that was purchased during the year. Long-term obligations, you issued the GO bonds in fiscal 17, made the first principal payment during the current year, and so the balance on those bonds is $2.7 million as of June 30th, and you'll continue making scheduled principal and interest payments going forward. So, in addition to the independent auditor's report that you'll find in the front of your financial report, we also issue a second opinion. It's sometimes referred as the Yellow Book opinion. This is our government auditing standards opinion. And that's where if we had significant recommendations, significant deficiencies or material weaknesses related to your internal controls, those would be reported in writing as findings in that opinion. And I'm very pleased to report that we don't have any written findings for the current year. That has not, you know, a few years ago, that certainly was not the case. And so what that means is that management has worked very hard to make improvements and to continue to improve processes and to remain diligent in maintaining effective internal controls for the town. And so we really appreciate all of Dorota and Stephanie and all of their staff's hard work to keep that going. A second area where we could potentially report significant matters in writing would be in the management letter. And again, we didn't have anything that rose to that level this year. So again, thank you to management for that. We do always like to remind you that if you had significant federal expenditures, expenditures exceeding $750,000 for a fiscal year, you would also require an additional compliance audit, which would be your single audit. That was not required this year since federal expenditures did not reach that level. But we always like to remind you that those significant grant awards from the federal government do always come with strings attached. So something to be aware of. So that brings me to the conclusion. I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have at this time.
All right, let me open up to any questions from council. None? All right, and I just want to highlight or make a couple comments. One, obviously, you know, we sat down and talked through the audit here recently, and you alluded to the past, the fact that a couple years ago we were not in this situation. And the one thing that was obviously of concern to me is over the last several years, largely due to, I think, a number of things which our former mayor put in place a few years ago with help from John and our staff, Dorota and Stephanie, were a lot of changes in our systems, our accounting systems, our checks and balances, our use of credit cards and so on. And one of my biggest questions or concerns is to make sure, okay, as you look at our activities and our processes, to be sure we're not backing off of any of those things. All of those actions are continuing to be implemented properly. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your answer back to me was yes, that you looked at those things and they're still, you're comfortable that we have all of those basic controls and processes in place.
Yes, sir. Each year we perform walkthroughs of significant processes and review the controls that are in place and make sure that they're still, that they're still in place and designed properly to mitigate their risks. So that is something that we look at as part of the audit process.
And then just the other thing, which whenever I say or write anything about our budget, I always want to highlight, is it's very easy for people to look at our fund balances, our general fund balance and our overall balance and say, wow, the town is awash in cash. And I always want to make the point that we have to be careful in looking at that balance for two reasons. One, you highlighted the point that we are always subject to storms and emergencies, and I think we only take a minute to think about what a Florence type hit here would have cost us and how quickly this balance would have gone away. I also want to always remind people that our revenue is an entirely economy-based revenue. We make money. The town's revenues are good when the town's economy is good, when houses are selling, contractors are busy, businesses are making money. But on the other hand, we don't have a property tax, and so if the economy drops, we will be very happy that we have this reserve because the revenues are not going to look like they do. And finally, having revenues, the revenue balances that we have, allows us the opportunity to do some things like we did last year, where we took a new look at our business permitting process and made changes to eliminate about half of the permits that we require of residents, largely because we had the financial resources to allow us to do that. So, I always just want to make it's easier for people to look at those balances and say, well, can the town reduce its revenues, or why do we have all that cash? And we need to remember that there are some forces that could put it the other way very quickly. So
Definitely.
if there's no other comments on the audit presentation, Emily, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll move to new business. Before I go to item A, which is Kiowa Native Plant Week proclamation, I do want to comment on one item that is not on the agenda today. Last month, we had the first reading of a revision of the town's beach lighting ordinance, and the intention was that we would have the second reading at today's meeting, and we have indefinitely pulled that that second reading from the agenda. And I think the reason for, well, I know the reason for that is because I think in discussion with staff, we concluded that we really wanted to step back. The ordinance that we have in place today is, Jim, what, 20, how many years old? 20-some years old? 91. It was put in place when we were largely a undeveloped island. We now are developed, and we want to step back and make sure that we really, really understand how we want to go about amending that. So it will, in fact, come forward at some point. As a consequence, the existing ordinance is still in place, so it still applies, and we'll continue to have that ordinance. But I would anticipate that probably late winter, certainly before turtle season. There's no hurry at this point. Right. Turtle season's over. So our intent will be to bring this back to council prior to the beginning of turtle season next year. So I just want to explain why that's off the agenda. Next item is Kiowa Native Plant Week proclamation, and I have a proclamation that I'd like to read. And I may have to ask, there's some pronunciations, Jim, I might need your help on here. They really messed me up. Anyway, a proclamation, Kiowa Native Plant Week. Whereas native plants are those which occur naturally in the specific regions, including our estuarine and tidal freshwater, maritime strand, freshwater wetlands, river and palustrine forested wetlands and associated coastal uplands. Whereas South Carolina currently contends with over 90 invasive and exotic plants, many of which compete with native plant species, degrade soil, facilitate erosion, require more fertilizers and chemicals, provide fewer food sources to native birds and other wildlife, and alter the island's natural landscapes. And whereas native plants provide iconic historical and environmental values unique to the island's history and to its future, and whereas maintaining and restoring native plant habitat is vital to preserving Kiowa's present and future biodiversity amid a changing environment, and whereas native plants provide high-quality food and shelter for more than 300 resident and migratory bird species in South Carolina, and whereas native plants are more drought-resistant, provide more insect food sources to birds and wildlife, require less water, which promotes water conservation and improves quality of storm runoff, and improves climate resiliency in South Carolina, and whereas planting, restoration, preservation, and cultivation of the state's indigenous plants provides a natural link to the wildland areas present and past, while presenting beauty and benefit and instilling a greater appreciation for Kiowa's natural heritage. And whereas to recognize the essential value and importance of Kiowa's native plants to the island's history, landscape, and environment, I therefore, I, Craig Weaver, Mayor of the town of Kiowa Island, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and laws of the town of Kiowa Island of the state of South Carolina, do hereby designate the third week of October as Kiowa Native Plant Week. And a copy of this will be available. And in conjunction with this, there are a number of activities or events that are planned during the next week. Most of these, I think, are conservancy related. So Conservation Matters. We'll have a program, Restoring Nations Relationships at Home, with Doug Tallamy on Monday, October 15 at the Sandcastle. The Kiowa Conservancy Garden Keepers program will have an event at the Demonstration Garden on Tuesday, the 16th. Mornings in the Garden, Growing Native with Justin Core will be on Wednesday, the 17th. And we also have coming soon a Grow Native plant database. And that link people will be able to find a link to that.
The link will be www.grownativeKiowa.com.
All right.
Right now it's just coming soon. It's still in development.
Still in the works. And so I certainly encourage people to take advantage of these events. And I think anyone who had their yards filled with marsh water after any of our last major events, or saw some of the recommendations from the Sea Level Rise Committee last week, I think we'll see the importance of this emphasis on native plants, and I think their importance to the community. So, so I encourage you to take part in some of those events. Our second item is to consider approval of the proposal from Kimley Horn for the Beach Walker Drive improvements. This was discussed and recommended for approval by Ways and Means last week. Let me first ask, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All right. John, I don't know if you have any more comments you want to make,
Yeah,
or
I
whether
can
there are any questions from
Comment
council.
a little bit, because Dave has mentioned the process. Essentially, the concern the town had, the town staff and myself, is that the process we're going through is simply taking too long, and we're running up against a deadline such that if we didn't get this part of it started, the engineering and analysis, there was no way it was going to be, the whole project would be completed by Memorial Day of next year, which is a very important goal. So just to be clear, the three bidders came in, presented their programs to the Public Works Committee in detail. So it was an in-person presentation. Some additional feedback was given by the committee. The bidders went back and then came back, rebid based on the additional feedback as to the requirements of the town. Kimley Horn was by a fairly large margin the lowest bid, and while the bids weren't exactly apples and oranges, I think the town staff felt that Kimley Horn pretty much covered everything that needed to be covered at a much lower price. Subsequently, as Dave mentioned, there was a discussion with two members of the Public Works Committee that were available for that discussion, and the town staff, where they I guess questioned Kimley Horn and clarified a couple of items and got comfortable that, in fact, their bid, in addition to being the lowest bid, would result in an outcome that was sufficient for the town to finish up the project. So that's kind of what happened, and it's unfortunate that, I mean, there was a fair amount of disagreement among the members of the Public Works Committee. One member wanted to throw everything out and start all over again. Well, that wasn't going to happen because we just don't have the time for it. We had other members that wanted to really just, pick apart the various proposals and decide exactly what the town needed. Well, here we're running into a problem where the perfect was getting in the way of the good, and the good was really required. So the decision was made to go ahead and go with the lowest bidder, recognizing that there may be some things that are not perfect about their program, but it appears that they will be doing everything we need done, and will be hopefully doing it in a timely fashion, and the town is on track, hopefully, to get this project finished before we hit the Memorial Day weekend of next year. So that's kind of background from the town's perspective.
Any other discussion, questions? All right, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, okay. Our next item is to consider approval of the Carolina Waste Contract Amendment for 2 compactors installed at Kestrel Court, and this was also discussed and at Ways and Means and recommended for approval by Town Council. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion, questions, comments? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Item D is to consider approval of the proposal from Watts Builders for the demolition of a residential structure located at 122 Turnberry Street. This was discussed in a specially called Ways and Means meeting just prior to today's council meeting, and was also discussed and recommended for approval by town council. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Before I take the vote on this, the only thing I want to highlight for anybody is that we do not yet, this is anticipation of a court order. We do not yet have the court order. The reason that we're handling this way is that we know that there is a great desire by the residents on this street who have been dealing with this problem for a year, that they would like to see the town demolish this house as soon as possible. And so we are anticipating that if we get the court order, we don't want the timing of having to go back, wait for the next Ways and Means Committee, then the next town council meeting, let another month go by. So we're doing this in anticipation, but I don't want anybody to be confused that we're ready to demolish. The court has not yet given us that approval.
When do you anticipate, or when do we anticipate that the court order might be forthcoming?
Look at it that way.
We're hoping within this month. Everything's within the clerk of court's hands. Sent in, nothing has been filed in opposition. So hopefully by the end of this month, as soon as we get that, we usually get at least 2 weeks notice, 10 days to 2 weeks notice before a hearing date set. So I'll advise council as soon as we get that, but it's all in the clerk of court, Julie Armstrong's hands.
So let me, if there are no other questions, let me take the vote. I have a
Well,
motion.
One
Okay.
quick comment, and that's, you mentioned they've been dealing with this in the residential neighborhood for a year. It's really 6 since this
That's
thing has
since-
become a
Right.
real problem.
Right.
So within the last year or 14 months is when we've been able to get, the town has been able to get this thing moved forward, but this issue's been going on for 6.
Great. All right, I have a motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have no other business, so town administrators report.
The only report that I have is that I did want to do an update for council on the trash concerns or matters that we have going on with the HA. Dorota and I have worked with both property management companies, Poston and Ravenel. We have resolved all the matter with Ravenel and most of Poston. We have sent letters out to owners, letting them know that they have the option to have curbside service once a week back door or twice a week back door. If you have a rental property, you're still required to have the twice a week back door. On Poston side, there are 3 HOAs that they elected to keep the twice a week back door service. And the other that we're still working with is Greens Lake Cottages. Gerard and I rode through there today to take a look. We're still in communication with Poston. I've actually put in a request to the managers at Poston to meet with them as quickly as possible so we can have this matter resolved. The issue centers around the layout of the cottages. They have their trash containers on top of their porches that's screened. We realize that Carolina Waste has been providing services for a number of years, going up on the steps and getting the trash cans. With that, aside from that practice, the risk management team of Carolina Waste was not aware of that. It just so happened that because we were having some trash issues, we went out there and we noticed that. In our conversations with them was when it was brought to their attention. Not because we thought there was a risk problem, but because there was always a lot of miss at that location. Once they discovered what staff was doing, because they didn't realize that, they had to go back and assess their own risk policy and liability. And they determined that it is a risk and a liability for them, for their staff to be going on the steps and bringing down heavy trash bins. So it's not a town decision or policy, it's the Carolina Waste. I have reached out to the management team today and I've asked them to please come on site to go to Green Lakes Cottages with myself and Dorota. They're going to come out later this week, and for us to meet on site to try to come up with a resolution. I've looked into and I've asked Poston if they can do a dumpster, and the board came back, and I went out to look today. There's no common area over there. The area that I thought they can put in there, it is a right-of-way that's owned by Kika. But if you can get it in that area, there's no great turn movement for trucks to be able to try to get in to get the dumpster. We had thought about before of having having those basically bring down their trash cans to the ground level and somewhat screening those. In some of those areas, there's just not enough real estate to be able to put the trash bins and screen them. They can put them on the ground level, but I'm not sure they'll be able to have them screened. So going back out this week and hopefully, and with Carolina Waste, and also meeting with Poston representatives, hopefully we can come up with some resolution. But I think the end result is how can we get the trash cans down, or the residents will have to be responsible for bringing the trash cans up and down the steps. So that's where we're at with Greens Lake. It's still in process, it's still in discussion. No final decision is made at this time. I've asked Carolina Waste, they've given us a deadline on November 1st. In today's email, I've asked them to extend that because we need more time to work through this process and try to come up with a resolution for that area. There's 34 homes or 34 cottages there, and about 13 are actually in the rental program, and the rest are primary residents or not in the rental program. So
What's that breakdown again?
it's 34 total cottages and 13 that we show that are in our rental program.
Okay.
Yeah. And based on our ordinance, we do require backdoor service on those, but of course, for that particular area, we may have to look at doing some other option for them. So that's where we're at with Green Lakes Cottages. Again, we're hoping, I've called for a meeting with Poston. They have not yet responded to a meeting date this week. I've actually asked them to also have a member from the KICOA board present at that meeting. And I've also called a meeting with Carolina Waste, which will be towards the end of this week.
How many steps?
Some of them have 5 steps. I think it's like maybe the average. Some of the steps are very wide, and they may have maybe a 6-inch gap between them. Some are maybe 4 steps, and they may not have a wide platform. So but they are walking up and down. The drivers or even the residents, for that point, will be carrying sometimes heavy trash cans down the steps, and it's a policy. We did ask Carolina Waste to put it in writing, and it's a, of course, they're looking at their risk factors and their liability, and that's a decision that they're made. But now we're trying to figure out a good compromise.
Are they currently picking up trash?
They're currently right now they've given us through November 1st,
Okay.
and so that's why I asked them to come out this week. And I've also asked them that we'll probably need a little bit longer timeline than November 1st, because if we have to look at doing some sort of, you can get some trash can, you can get the bins down on the ground level, but some of the areas you may have to remove some of the shrubbery. Then you may have to put a concrete pad there. So there's things that potentially could be done, but it's going to take longer than 30 days. So so that's one of the reasons why I'm asking them to meet me out there this week, so the management team clearly has an understanding. We're not asking to go against their policy, but to give us more time to come up with a resolution.
If anyone hasn't gone by to see it, you should. It really is a conundrum.
It is.
Yeah, there's not an obvious.
There's not an obvious answer.
not an obvious
Your
answer.
comments are correct.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Right. So I just wanted to give you all an update, let you know that we are working through. Also on the letters that we did send out, giving people the option, it's my understanding that we have not received a lot of calls requesting a change to curbside service.
16 so far.
16? 16 out of how many do we send out? Do you remember?
There's 200 something.
288.
288.
We just mailed on Friday, so some people.
May have got it Saturday, or they may have got it yesterday. But we've gotten 16 calls, but I don't know if we made any changes yet, or requests for change. And that's all that I have.
All right, council member, committee or general comments, Diana?
The only thing I have is upcoming Arts Council events. And we have a piano bar tomorrow night with Robbie with Robbie Madison, who would beat you by a day. Same group. But this is just Robbie Madison duo that we have, and you have an actually a larger group coming in on Thursday. And then Mike and McClellan will be at Church of Our Savior at 4 o'clock on Sunday. And David Holt presents Festival of Mountain Music, which will be at East Beach this year, not at Freshfields. And it's Sunday, October 21st. We also had Pure Theater has had to cancel. They were scheduled for October 14th, but because their main actor couldn't get here from Maine for rehearsals and all, they had to cancel, and they're hoping to be able to rearrange another date sometime in the spring.
Okay. John?
Just a couple things. One, I'd like to congratulate Stephanie and Dorota and the staff for the fine work they did leading to the result that they received in the audit. I think it's probably reasonable to say that the town is now in the best controlled financial environment that it's ever been in, and hopefully that will continue. Also, the staff has produced the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR, which is that on the website now? Yeah, it should be. Yeah. It's on the website. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's a really fine piece of work, has a lot of interesting information, and pretty much anything you'd ever want to know about the town's finances are covered in there in one place or another. A couple of items related to roads. I had another discussion at last week's CHATS meeting with our highway commissioner regarding the famous bump as you come off the island towards Town Hall here. He said basically that the staff is adamant that they are not going to fix it because it doesn't need to be fixed yet, but he has promised that he and the staff will continue to monitor it, and if it does get worse, they'll take appropriate action, so we'll see. Charleston Council had a meeting recently which was very interesting. The County Council, at the meeting, it came out, and I kind of suspected this but didn't know for a fact, funds had been available and made available several years ago to essentially widen Maybank 4 lanes all the way to from the bridge to Main Road. A large chunk of those funds, about half, were diverted to fund road improvements over on James Island, where our current county council representative lives. Apparently this was at least partially, if not solely, the result of Mayor Riley and his staff in the city demanding that Maybank not be widened and that the pitchfork process be put in place, which is in process but not completed. And though they are saying now that the money is available to complete it, probably isn't going to help very much, but we'll see how that works out.
Is that north and south, both?
Well, theoretically, yes.
Okay.
But I don't think it'll happen. For one thing, the landowner has pulled back.
That's right.
The other interesting comment at that council meeting was that Anna Johnson, the representative of part of Johns Island, demanded that Maybank now be 4-laned, which was kind of an unusual change of a position, but interesting. You've seen in the paper probably this morning, 526 seems to now be alive again. There may be something coming out soon, who knows, or maybe nothing, we'll see. But there is a state infrastructure bank meeting coming up, and there may be some activity there, we'll see. The other thing I found interesting is there's a process called NEPA, which is environmental review that has to occur in any project that involves federal funding. That can take 8 years, which is why a lot of things that should be getting done aren't getting done. The current administration apparently is working to reduce that down to a max of 2 years. We'll see if that really occurs, but that would be a major plus in trying to fix some of the infrastructure issues we have. And last but not least, those of you who like to go to Bishop Gadsden, they're going to be putting a roundabout at Camp Road and Riverland, so you won't have to deal with that absolutely dangerous intersection any longer. There'll be a nice roundabout there at great expense. That's all I had.
Yeah. Chris?
Couple things, an update on Station 6, Fire Station 6 near Flyway. They're now looking at a December 15th completion date. That's a slippage of about 3 weeks from last month's report, due mostly to Hurricane Florence, but also due to some late arrival of roofing materials. The final roofing is due to be finished today. The window installation will start, and once they get that building encapsulated, they do not anticipate any further delays. A reminder to residents and any interested parties, there is a St. John's Fire Department Commission vacancy starting in December. If any resident of Kiowa is interested in learning more about the position, please contact me or Stephanie or the mayor. We'll be happy to discuss it. And the next e-blast from communications will have some information about absentee voting in the December municipal election. So if anyone's interested in that, we will cover that in the e-blast out in the next week or so. Correct.
Can I ask a question? That election is the same day as a council meeting, right? This will be the election location? Will we be holding our meeting at the same time here?
Just like this,
Okay, so they'll both go on, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
or I was going Mayor, you and I are going to potentially talk about that, because we can also change our council date as well.
Well, if
One date, Monday.
If the election people are comfortable with it, I would prefer to just keep them on the same day, but we can have that conversation, okay, all right,
I have nothing.
all right. And I just have two things that I want to, or actually one thing that I want to also comment on. Last week, and I think some of you were there, last week we had a first joint meeting between the town council, the ARB board, and the KICA board to have a first conversation, and I stress first, a first conversation about the sea level rise subcommittee's report. The intent of that meeting was a first opportunity for all of our groups to be able to begin to talk about their recommendations. We had representatives of the committee there who were there to answer questions. Again, our intent here is to stay on top of continuing to have discussions and work the issues that have been raised and suggested by the group. Some of that which will occur in each of the different entities. I know that KICA, I think, met yesterday or the day before, and my understanding had a really good substantive discussion and follow-up. I don't know about the ARB, so I was happy. I thought that it was a good discussion, a starting point, and I got good feedback from it. So we've had that committee discussion. With that, citizens' comments?
Before citizens, I'm sorry, I have one
Did I
other.
miss something?
I just have one other comment that I would like to report, that the fourth quarter town notes will be published later this month and will include the municipal election candidates' bios. That's it.
So we have some.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have some. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Green Larrick. I live at 1082 Terrapin Court, Sparrow Pond, Kiowa Island. I'm a citizen of Kiowa Island and a concerned Greens Lake Cottage neighbor. On September 20th, 2018, Ms. Subert informed Ms. Cox, the posting manager who provides service to Greens Lake, that Carolina Waste has a company policy that they don't service customers unless trash and recycling containers are at ground level. I am surprised to hear of this policy because Carolina Waste has been servicing the Greens Lake cottages with their raised trash enclosures for many years, and before that, it was the previous waste company that did it. This was the first time that I had heard of this policy or the town's concerns regarding elevated trash and recycling containers. I wish to point out, as was noted by Ms. Tillerson, that there is no common property within Greens Lake on which to place dumpsters. Dumpsters are out as a solution because there's nowhere to put them. Greens Lake properties are tiny, and there is little space to build new trash enclosures that would be on the ground. Building new ground-level trash containers will destroy what little greenery surrounds these homes and or eliminate much of the small driveways that they have. Any new ground-level trash enclosures will not lead to the elimination of the current elevated trash enclosures because they also contain the HVAC system for each Greens Lake cottage. So in fact, you can just add another structure to what's already there. I find it remarkable that Carolina Waste's accepted bid for solid waste service was silent as regards any requirement for ground-level trash enclosures. Like much of Kiowa, the majority of Greens Lake properties are rented. So having renters bring the large trash containers to the street and then return them to their current concealed location is not a realistic option. You can't even get renters to throw garbage bags into your storage containers, and that's why you're now paying for trash compactors. In addition, one of the two full-time Greens Lake residents is a 90-year-old widow who lives alone. She is never going to be able to bring those trash cans down to the ground by herself. Having her bring the trash recycling containers to the curb from its current location is an unrealistic expectation also. Now I am being told Carolina Waste's new owner, Waste Connections, wishes to terminate all solid waste recycling services for any Greens Lake cottage that does not bring their trash cans and recycling containers to the ground level, effective November 1st, 2018. I have a question for Town of Kiowa Island's attorney, Mr. Dwayne Green. Isn't Waste Connections required to honor the contract that the town signed with them before the start of this fiscal year? If yes, how can this problem be occurring now? I will point out that it is impossible for the Greens Lake cottages to come into compliance with a town mandate that all trash enclosures be at ground level by November 1st. November 1st is 21 business days from now, and the town has not yet even notified Greens Lake cottage owners of the issue, nor has the Kiowa Island Cottage Owners Association sent a courtesy email to the Greens Lake owners at the request of the Town of Kiowa Island staff. We were told to hold off on it. For those of you who have not had the pleasure of renovating a residence on Kiowa Island, here are the steps that each Greens Lake cottage owner is going to have to take. 1, obtain a contractor or architect to design a ground-level trash enclosure. 2, submit the design to the KICOA regime for review and approval, as it has that purview. 3, submit the design to the Kiowa Island ARB for review and approval. Pay the permit fee to the ARB. 4, obtain a Town of Kiowa Island permit for construction of ground-level trash enclosure. Pay the applicable fees to the Town of Kiowa Island. 5, remove shrubbery or driveway to create space for the ground-level trash enclosure. 6, have the contractor execute the approved plans, which will include pouring of a concrete pad as well as erecting an enclosure. 7, have ground-level trash enclosure construction inspected and approved by the ARB or the Town of Kiowa Island before it can be used. Surely the Town of Kiowa Island needs to come up with an alternative solution so they can continue to carry out one of your core services to those who reside within the town limits. And I will point out that Greens Lake is not the only entity on this island that has this issue. Perhaps the town isn't aware of it, but there are other entities. And the Kiowa Island Community, the Cottage Owners Association, the board, has taken the position that this is an issue that exclusively resides between the town and the Greens Lake owners. And that is why today I am not speaking on behalf of the KICOA board, but only as a concerned neighbor who couldn't really live with herself without talking out, because the Greens Lake folks haven't had the opportunity to even find out the trouble they are in. Thank you.
If I can, I hope, though, that you did take from Stephanie's comments in summary that, if I could, but I just want to reiterate that I hope.
What I'm telling you is that the KICOA board is not going to meet with you and neither will Post.
Okay.
Because they don't view it, they view it as a problem directly between the Greens Lake and.
Okay. But now I'm going to finish my comment that I tried to make, which is I do hope that you took from Stephanie's comments that the town does take this seriously. We know we have a dilemma. I think you can get from the comments that a number of members of staff and a number of council members have been there and gone to look at the situation. We have not landed on any resolution at this point. I think Stephanie indicated that we're working with
One-on-one between the town of Kiowa Island and the Greens Lake cottage owners. So it's going to be, you're having to work with those Greens Lake cottage owners directly, one-on-one.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that that's not the position I took, but as you all know, the majority rules.
All right, thank you.
I was just,
Appreciate all of the comments and all of your insights, and I just, again, want to emphasize that we realize this is a serious issue, and we're spending a lot of time to try to get it resolved, so we'll see where we get. Okay. I got it. Thank you. Wendy, go ahead.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. At the last KICA board meeting, Jimmy mentioned that water company reached out to the town, or has the town had any conversation with Southwest Water? You know, one of the concerns that a number of us had when Southwest Water took over KIU was that historically they have a record of going for significant increases every 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I have to second your comments, Craig, about the workshop, the joint workshop amongst the entities. I think it was very helpful for everybody to hear what others had to say, and as you indicated at the end of it, each entity was to go back, talk amongst themselves, and see what they thought ought to be done going forward. Only suggestion I have for the follow-up workshop once it's scheduled is find a way. I understand that the way the AV system is set up, it can't be streamed in there. If there is any way to have that next meeting in here where it can be live streamed so people can watch it as it happens, I would certainly hope that that would be done. John, a question for you about County Council's decision as far as the road is concerned. Did they provide any information as to where the county funds would come from?
For which road?
For 526?
No, not really. I mean, the assumption, I think, is, and what has been discussed at chats is some of it would come from sales tax, some of it would come from essentially the guide share allocations, the federal guide share allocations, and some of it would come from the county. But as to exact breakdowns, I've not seen anything definitive.
I would have been surprised if you said anything else, John. And my last question is, has anyone else filed for town council since the last meeting?
Council and mayor. We have.
And Diana's not running.
Well, I don't know if I should speak for people, but at this point in time, I've filed for mayor. Councilman Waddock has filed for a second term. The remaining members, current members of the town council have not filed. And I think the filing closes at noon on Friday, but I don't want to speak for them, but I anticipate that they will not be filing. We do have three people who have filed for town council, in addition to Councilman Wydock. I would prefer, once that date comes by and closes and we have anybody or everybody, I mean, there could be still 10 other people coming in, so once that closing date comes, then I think a communication will go out very quickly to the community.
Well, because at last meeting, there was an indication of 2 people who had filed.
Yeah, let me put it this way. We have 3 empty town council seats at the moment, and we have 3 people who have filed to run for town council. So if there are no other people coming in between now and Friday, we will have an uncontested election.
Okay, then now that you've said that, my question is, why the change of heart? Last month, you indicated by name the people who had filed for council. If there's a third,
I only said me last time. I only said me. I'm the only one who said anything last time.
no, you hadn't, but last month, it was in,
I don't think no one had filed by that time.
It was just
Okay.
me.
It was just within days of.
I stand corrected.
It was just me, and I don't know, has anyone else filed for mayor? No.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I did want to answer your one question, the water company. I have the same, I think, general information that you alluded to Kika having. I have, I think I was informed by, well, I know I was informed by the utility company that they were considering, but nothing more significant than that. So there was some discussion of them considering a rate increase application sometime in the fall. I haven't seen any. I don't know what the details of it are, what the size would be. And we follow the state, you know, we get communicated to if anything files, so we're watching that, but I haven't seen anything. So I don't know what I don't know whether they have, and I'm not sure I know what their current intentions are.
Dave DiStefano, 31 Burroughs Hall. The issue I want to bring up are the low-speed vehicles. The mayor and I have had a couple of emails going back and forth on this issue. Before the last Kika meeting, I asked for some people to send me some emails as to what they felt about that, and my printer ran out of ink. It was an overwhelming response that people want to ban these vehicles on Kiowa Island and in the town. There's been a big increase this year.
To clarify, these are like the, sort of the hopped-up golf carts that do about 15 miles an hour?
Right, and that's one of the terms.
35 by law.
Yeah, that's one of the terms I want to address to clarify some things. I've clarified this, and I looked up the law. It's always nice to look up the law to find out what it is, to let everybody know what the law is. A low-speed vehicle is a vehicle, it's not a glorified golf cart. It's a low-speed vehicle that has to be certified at the manufacturer's facility as certified. It has to be on a road 35 miles an hour or less. It cannot exceed 25 miles an hour. It has to get up to 20 miles an hour within a certain distance. It has to have all of the various accoutrements of an automobile. It has to have seat belts. It has to have headlights. It has to have windshield wipers. It has to have a windshield. It has to have tail lights and turn lights and mirrors and all of that stuff. If you've seen some of these vehicles going around the island, most of them have none of that. And most of them are, in fact, glorified golf carts. The question, and the reason I'm bringing it up at the town, I know with my communications with the mayor that Kika and the town are looking at that issue. I think it has to be addressed fairly quickly for a very important reason. We don't want to ban them after another 10 or 15 people in Kiowa buy them. We also don't, I think the rental companies should have an idea what's going to happen next season, whether or not they're going to be allowed. State law provides that any municipality or county can ban them in the interest of safety. So the town, right now, can ban these vehicles. They can pass an ordinance to ban these vehicles. Now, the issue has arisen, can the town ban the vehicles past the gate. They can only be operated within 4 miles of the garage they're kept in. So that's a precedent that the state has limited the use of these type of vehicles on private property, on gated communities. So whether or not the town's ordinance would be enforced on Kika, at a minimum, it would stop these vehicles from coming from the first gate to Freshfields, the most dangerous road here, and on the second most dangerous road, very slow, Beachwalker Drive with all of that traffic. So at a minimum, it would stop that. That would put a great deterrent on the rental companies from renting because people are now 18 miles an hour. When I got to the second gate, there were 4 or 5 cars in line, so I had to slow down and wait. Well, this car didn't have a sticker. Cans in their hands going around. The most dangerous thing is women holding their infants. In South Carolina has one of the most strict child safety seat laws. Those vehicles are subject to that law. That means a rear-facing baby seat for anybody under 2 years old. I don't know if they could accomplish that. So I implore the town, ban them. Whether or not that affects Kika, we'll never know. Let Kika do what they're going to do. But I think we can eliminate this problem because I have not run into anybody that wants these things except 2 people that already own them. And I believe they're glorified golf carts. And the mayor said that the town will enforce these rules. 90% of these things don't meet the requirements of state law. Thank you.
And I'm pretty comfortable that we are gonna take a serious look. We need to do it in conjunction with the community association for the issues that you raise. Both of us have sort of different jurisdictions, and there's always the potential we could ban them on the roads that we own, but these companies can trailer it to the front gate. So I think I'm comfortable that over the coming months, the town and the community association together, probably through the Public Safety Committee.
Yeah, I've already reached out to Tony. I don't know if he shared it with you, but we're going to meet next week, and we really want to understand both sides, both what Kika's opinions and positions would be, what the town's capabilities are.